Welcome to look at this video, which focuses on the concept of assessment. My name is Irmeli Assesment from JAMK University of Applied Sciences, and my colleague is...
Hello, my name is Telle Hailekari, and I come from Häme University of Applied Sciences.
Telle, would you like to say a few words about the basics of assessment, the basic purpose of assessment?
Yes. Well, assessment has many different purposes, but at least two main purposes can be identified. Traditionally, assessment has been seen as a way to sort of control student learning and assess what they have learned, for example, during a course or during a module, and then use this information, for example, for selection purposes or certification purposes. So the main purpose has been sort of to control that the students have learned what they are supposed to learn. But nowadays, the sort of a modern view of assessment sees assessment as a very powerful way to promote student learning. We know from a lot of research that assessment guides students' learning very strongly. So by designing assessment carefully, it's possible to support student learning and enhance their current and future learning. So the main thing is to align the assessment with the intended learning outcomes and the competencies that the students are supposed to learn during the course, and in that way steer student learning to the right direction. So still both of these purposes are prevalent, so we still need to assess student learning, but also bring this perspective of promoting learning to this assessment culture.
Well, that's clear and important aspect regarding assessment. Let's move from the basic purposes of the assessment to look at the different types of assessment, and in particular to those which promote learning.
Yes, there are different types of assessment that can be used when assessing student learning and knowledge within a certain course or course entity. And these all different types of assessment have a little different purpose. So let's start with this diagnostic assessment. And diagnostic assessment is the type of assessment that usually happens in the beginning of the course or before the course starts. And the purpose of this type of assessment is to assess what the students know before the course and what sort of prior knowledge they have before they start the course, and or also to activate their prior knowledge in order to start the learning process. Then another type of assessment is summative assessment, which is the traditional type of assessment that usually happens at the end of the course. And the aim of this type of assessment is to assess what the students have learned during the course and whether they have reached the learning outcomes of the course. And this is still a very prevalent type of assessment, but it should not be the only type of assessment, because this usually happens at the end of the course, and then it's not possible for the students to change their course of learning anymore or get the feedback. So summative assessment should also, there should be also types of formative assessment during the course. And this type of assessment is assessment that happens already during the course and which gives a possibility to give the students, and they have a possibility to see where they still need to improve and change their course of learning. So this type of assessment is very important when we think about the enhancing students' learning during the course. Then the fourth type of assessment is integrative assessment, which is where the focus is more on influencing students as future learners. So this means that the assessment should focus on promoting skills that are needed in the future, so beyond the course content. So this means that the focus is also on assessing future skills and skills that the students will need in their working life or in their future studies. So when we talk about assessment, it should enhance both current learning, so the learning that happens during the course, as well as provide students with feedback and possibilities to reflect on their own learning and give them tools for future learning experiences as well.
Yes, maybe we can move on to look at the planning of assessment and planning assessment activities. We have here 6 questions to consider and make decision on when we plan assessment activities. The basic questions are what to assess. For example, Telle already mentioned learning outcomes many times, that the assessment should focus on learning outcomes and the things that we want the students to learn. Why we assess, so the basic purpose of the assessment has to be considered as well. So are we enhancing the learning process, or are we do we want to find out that what the students have learned, what they have got in the end of learning process? Also, we have to consider that who is the one who assesses. Is it the students themselves, or peers, or teacher, or someone else? For example, a person in the workplace. Then again, the question is, when do we assess? Is it before we start a learning process, or during the learning process, or in the end of the learning process? And very important question is how we assess. We should have a variety of ways to assess the learning because it is linked with the learning outcomes, and what are the ways that we can find out the students what they have achieved, or what they still need to study and learn. And then one question is that where the assessment takes place. Is it in the classroom, or is it, for example, in the teaching practice place, or somewhere else? So at least these questions are important to consider and make decisions on in planning assessment process. If we want to summarize somehow that where we should focus on in the modern way of assessment, how would you summarize the direction that we should have?
Yes, well, here are some main points. So we should move from only assessment of learning to also use the assessment as a tool for learning. So assessment can be used to enhance student learning and so on. We should also move from control and teacher-led assessment practices to assessment of processes and student activities, and provide students with feedback already during the course. Also, to move from final exams and summative assessment to assessment practices that already provide students with timely feedback and so that they can reflect on their learning and get feedback on their learning already during the course. So assessment can be also a learning situation.
Yes, surely it is so. Finally, we can summarize the whole video by using these thoughts. Could you please say the final words of this video, please?
Yes, well, to put it very simply, if you want to change student learning, then change the methods of assessment. So as we already mentioned, assessment is a very powerful way to start influencing the students' learning process. So it's very important to consider it very carefully and use it as a part of the whole learning process. And as David Baud has said, students can escape the effects of bad teaching, but they can't escape the effects of bad assessment. So here is some food for thought, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.